It's impossible to calculate whether an ambiguous basket of tariff increases and tax reductions will overall strengthen or weaken the economy. Hey, my name's John. I have a PhD in economics. I also correctly predicted the outcome of the election, and I'm a known figure online. I think these are some of the reasons you should trust my analysis over some of the anonymous fear-mongering that's going online. In this video, we'll talk about whether current knowledge on forthcoming tech and policy changes mean that you should or should not learn to code. So Stix agrees that things are getting better in the short term, and what we're referring to there is the short-term increase in the S&P and the NASDAQ, which occurred after the election. So there's been a lot of anxiety in the markets building up to the election, and when that election resolved, we get rid of that anxiety, which is good for the markets. And so what I said is that we should expect a job count pop in Q1. So Q1 is historically a hiring season in tech. The NASDAQ went up notably more than the S&P. So there's actually a disproportionate benefit to the tech industry as the result of this election. What there's been a failure to appreciate is the fact that market signals are long-term forecasts. So by looking at the market, this is not just me thinking what's going to happen in the long term. This is all of the investors across the world that participate in these markets. They would not be pouring money into the market if they thought that the bottom would fall out of the market, say, next year. So this is actually a really bullish, a really positive signal, not just about the short term. We're observing it in the short term, but it's a leading indicator about expected positive outcomes in a medium to long term. Stix asks, what about the dynamics of the job market according to tariffs? So I think a lot of this is going to be speculative, and what I would encourage you to do is not to engage in long-term speculation. If we don't know, just treat it as, I don't know, could be positive, could be negative, net value 0, and basically ignore it in your calculus. On that thought process, learning to code is going to look great. But what if we do want to take seriously this longer-term analysis because we're hearing these fear-mongering voices that something horribly is going to happen in, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, some unknown number of years? What is actually the realistic outcome of an increase in tariffs? The realistic outcome is reduced imports. It's actually not clear to me that any particular tariffs of notable size will ultimately be put in place. I think this is being used as a bargaining chip by policymakers. So the fact that it's being used as a bargaining chip means it's subject to negotiation, and also there's a non-zero probability that they just won't be levied at all. Still, if there are ultimately some tariffs put in place, that will tend to reduce the size of imports and increase domestic production. This would not be expected to directly reduce software engineering wages. What it might do is directly boost wages in those industries that are no longer imported, say maybe car manufacturer or chip manufacturer. So if you think that this is realistically going to happen and you can predict the product that is going to get tariffed, maybe you're really, really confident that you should become a hardware engineer instead of a software engineer, and maybe you'll get some small boost to your wages that way. I think that's an incredibly risky gamble on your part, and I would go for the thing we already know is working, which is software engineer. This also relates to mass deportation. Mass deportation will not have a significant effect on software engineering. Software engineering is a high-skill labor field. Mass deportation will disproportionately impact low-skill sectors of the economy, so it just mostly won't directly deal with the industry, except insofar as there's a labor vacuum in lower skill areas. You could go into those lower skill areas, but the truth is they're still not going to pay as well as software engineering. They might end up paying slightly better than they otherwise would have paid in the absence of a mass deportation. That's still not going to be as good as a high skill job. Finally, let's deal with the argument that it's too late to learn to code. I think there's two key things to address here. One would be it has been a hard market this year, so employers have raised the qualification bar. And the second would be things like AI and coding, that some coding tasks are being automated. So Cursor is an IDE. It's one of these products that uses AI to automate certain coding tasks. And according to the Cursor team, the people building the product, they think it's easier than ever to get into coding because these AI tools help you code. In the research on Copilot, we see that early career programmers are disproportionately benefited. And in my own research, when I advocate search techniques, I advocate an AI-first searching technique in 2024 and beyond. So rather than automating away jobs, I think AI tools are making the software engineer's job easier and more accessible for career switchers and students. It is true that employers are currently pickier because the market is an employer's market. They get to be choosier. I went through this job search myself this year. I was able to get an offer within a month and then multiple offers within 2 months. So there are practices that you can use to overcome these obstacles that Latterly teaches you. That's why I hope that you'll follow the page. Ask a question if you'd like specific details. This is going to be to do with social networking, portfolio building, conducting the interview, and more. But I would also say that that will be changing based on my forecast in the near future. So again, I'm predicting that in Q1, there are going to be more jobs on the table. So the fact that this is a problem now doesn't mean that we should think that this is a problem in the future. I hope this information helped. Thanks so much for being here. Follow for more.